Welcome to Functional Philosophy, the show in which I, Charles II, explain and apply Ayn Rand's philosophy, objectivism. If you'd like to ask me a question on objectivism or its application, just go to charles2.com/contact. And my last name is spelled T as in tango, E as in echo, and W as in whiskey. Hello everyone! Episode 100, and if you are watching this on YouTube, you will have noticed something different by now. You can actually see me. Now, if this works out, I plan to do all of my podcasts like this going forward. I'll still put them up on the audio-only channels, of course, but on YouTube, I will start doing them in actual video form, where you can see me rather than a still image for the duration of the podcast. That's assuming everything works out. Who knows? Maybe the audio won't end up right or something like that. So this is a test, but I hope it works, and I hope to continue doing it this way. Now, as for this being the 100th episode, I don't have anything special to say. I'm glad I got here, and I look forward to 100 more. Okay, now another thing I'm going to do, since this is my 100th episode, is permit myself to clean up, mop up some possible confusion about previous answers I've given. Usually I don't do this. I just let misstatements or sloppy wording or answers delivered in terms of non-essentials go as part of the cost of doing business of this kind. Putting out a podcast every week like this means that I shoot from the hip. I couldn't put this out if I were planning it each week, which I did at the beginning. I would type out a script and read from that and improvise a little, but now I just talk off the top of my head, which is the only way I can do this every week while doing all of the other stuff I do too. So I just accept that that's part of it. That's just part of speaking extemporaneously, but it's my 100th episode, so what the hell. I'll elaborate on a couple things that I thought of after the fact on a couple recent episodes. So the first was my answer on whether happiness is essential for survival. And I don't disagree with anything I said, anything my former self said, but I did leave out an important point, which is that when we are talking about survival, we are talking about survival of a specific organism, of a thing. There's no such thing as survival on its own. It's like anything else. There's no such thing as walking on its own. I just saw some walking outside. Just some walking? What was walking? Nothing, just walking. That obviously doesn't make any sense. Things walk. Things survive. So when you say, is happiness essential for survival? Happiness is survival as a human being. That is what it means to survive as a human being. Now, if you drop that context of what is surviving, well then, turtles live longer than human beings. So does that mean if you found some mad scientist who could turn you into a turtle, you should choose that because it's all about survival, right? No, it's about survival as a human being. Ayn Rand is careful to point that out, and this is what she means. There's no point in... You could be a vegetable and have biological immortality. Of course, there'd be no point in living if you were a vegetable and you couldn't feel anything, but you can have immortality. No, when we talk about survival, we mean survival as a human being. And happiness is essential for that, not just because that is in fact what rationally justifies survival, but that is what it means to be surviving as a human being. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to clean up was, well, I suppose these aren't really cleanups in the broader sense, I guess. They're more addendums. So this was on my answer regarding implicit knowledge. And I talked about how implicit knowledge works, uh, how it takes time, how it's not, the law of identity isn't obvious to everyone immediately, and it takes a genius philosopher like Aristotle or Ayn Rand or Antonius Andreas, who was the actual formulator of the law of identity, to state it. To state it. So I just wanted to add to that point that this is true of everything. This isn't anything special about the axioms of philosophy. The axioms of philosophy are special, but not in this regard. Everything perceptual that isn't a concrete, isn't an entity, constitutes implicit knowledge. This actually relates to the question I just answered. Again, think of survival. What is surviving? It's a kind of action, but actions are actions of things. Things are the only thing that are given to us explicitly. Everything else is implicit knowledge until you focus on it. So you see a green ball. What you see is the green ball as a whole, as one thing. To notice the greenness explicitly, you have to focus on that. Now, there have to be multiple instances of green as against other colors for you to be able to do that, but the point is you still have to be in a context where you can focus on the color and then actually focus on it. Same thing with the shape, the fact that it's a ball. What is given to you are concrete entities. That is the only given explicit knowledge. Everything else, attributes like shape and color, relationships like beside or underneath, actions like rolling, all of those require an act of focus. To notice the act of rolling explicitly, or the attribute of green, or the relationship of in front of, all of that requires a special act of focus, just like recognizing the law of identity does. And that's because all of those are similar in that they aren't perceptual concretes. Now, two other things to say about this. One is, I just want to make clear, not everything is implicit knowledge. The fact that water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit is not implicit knowledge. You don't know that at all until you do the experiment. Implicit knowledge is something you hold passively, and then you have to take action to make explicit. So it applies to things like things that you see, like the greenness of a ball. That's there, but it's passive. You have to focus on that because that's not what's automatically in your awareness. What you see first is the whole object. And the second thing was, oh yeah, how the axioms do differ. Existence and identity do differ from greenness, for instance, in the sense that greenness is an attribute, let's say, of this ball, but identity or existence, those aren't attributes. Existence is the fact that the thing exists at all. Identity is the fact that it is what it is, that it is the summation of its attributes. Kant is actually the first one to name this explicitly. The fact that existence isn't an attribute. Something good, Kant said. So the axioms are different in that way, but Nevertheless, you will notice that they are similar to attributes in that they aren't concrete. Just like you can't find greenness. There's no, oh, there's a green over there. A green what? There is no identity. Identity isn't an object. Existence isn't some object. Existence and identity are the fact of objects and what it means to be an object. So to identify those takes an active focus the same way it takes an active focus to identify any specific color, shape, or whatever. All right, so that is just in the way of commenting on previous answers. Now to today's questions. 1. What is your opinion on housewives? Gavin, that's Gavin McInnes, likes to say that 5% of women should be in the workforce and the rest would be happier at home. Do you agree with this sentiment to some extent? Well, first I have to correct your question. You frame this in terms of housewives, but Gavin's point is that people should, in 95% of cases, be having children, and therefore women who stay at home would be taking care of children. So what he is advocating is not for an increase in the number of housewives per se, but an increase in the number of stay-at-home moms. That's important. Because I do agree with that to, if you put it literally, to some extent, yes, I agree with that. And I don't mean in the literal sense that I agree that there should be some stay-at-home moms, but I mean with the sentiment he's expressing, which is that there should be more stay-at-home moms than currently exist. Clearly, many women are going into the workforce and not having children in the first place as a result of adherence to irrational feminist ideology. And so, if that didn't exist, if people were acting rationally, I think there would be more women staying at home with children. Now, what percentage that would be, I have no idea. But there are pressures that are causing there to be fewer stay-at-home moms and people having children in general. One of these is just anti-human nihilism, this Malthusian population bomb idea that we need to have fewer human beings, which is obviously nihilistic. They just want to destroy human beings. And then there are particular versions of this, usually focused on the West or whites or whatever. Actually, usually just those two. But I don't think that's the main reason there are fewer births. I think there may be some rational reasons for it, but I'm not sure about that. I do think that many fewer people are having children today because they have been trained in disintegration. So they never enter the realm of human joy where raising children resides. Because they have been trained in disintegration, people today are crude materialists. They just think, oh, raising a kid, that means I can't spend my money on what I want, or whatever. I can't get a nice car, or whatever it is. I have to take care of a kid. Oh, God. They don't think of it in the terms, for instance, Ayn Rand would have thought of it. Well, I want to devote more time to my career, and that's worth more to me than having a kid. Now, raising a kid, having a career, both of these are long-term, purposeful goals. But that is exactly the kind of pleasure that people are unfamiliar with today because they don't think in terms of length or in long terms. So for them, having a kid, I'm not saying everybody would have children, obviously. There are people for whom that's not the most rational decision. But people today don't even get to the point of rationally considering it, because it's not, well, long-term career versus long-term raising children. It's short-term, I want this material stuff my money can buy, versus this long-term value, which I'm not even going to consider because it is long-term. The idea of what kind of joy and pleasure you can get out of raising children, that's just unreal to the common mindset today. So yeah, I don't know what the percentages would be. All I can say is there are fewer people having, or there are people who aren't having children who would if they were being rational, and there are women who aren't staying at home with children who would if they were being rational. Now, if everybody were rational, how would that shake out? I don't know. But I do think it makes sense for many women to stay at home raising children, not being housewives. It's hard to imagine cooking and cleaning being a satisfying, productive life. All human beings need productive work to be happy. That goes for women as well as men. So just doing whatever a housewife would do without raising children, I can't see leading to a happy life, unless maybe you live in a gigantic mansion and you spend all day taking care of that and coming up with better ways to do that. That's just a fantasy half joke I'm coming up with. But raising a child is definitely productive work, but still, that's not going to take up your entire life. So even if I agreed that the vast majority of women shouldn't be in the workforce when they're raising their children, they're going to have to do something afterwards, unless they just want to shrivel up and die or have no reason for living. So I can't answer this any more specifically than that, except to say that if you've heard me speak positively of Gavin, which I have sometimes, and also spoken negatively of him, the reason I like Gavin is not for his views. So don't, if you hear Gavin express some view, say, oh yeah, I wonder, let me make sure Charles agrees with that, because I probably don't, because Gavin is a complete idiot. He is actually, I think, the most unscrupulous thinker I have ever seen. He just has no concern whatsoever for consistency, even though he does actively use his mind all the time, which is why I did call him a thinker, at least in some sense. He's the most extreme manifestation of treating thinking and ideas like a game that I've ever seen. So don't take don't take me as likely to agree with anything he says. Next, besides Dragon Ball, what are some shows that you love and think other people should watch? Well, I don't necessarily think people should watch Dragon Ball. There are objectively good aspects of that show. And then there are aspects I like but can't objectively validate. It's like if you're not an artist or don't know anything about art style and you see somebody's drawings, but or you see a painting and you like it, but you don't know anything about painting. Well, within a range, you can say, I like this, but I'm not sure why. And there are elements of Dragon Ball that are like that for me, so I can't go around recommending it on those attributes, objectively anyway. Also, there's a definite theme of Zen, Eastern mindlessness in Dragon Ball, which I can see being a deal breaker for some people. Well, I won't go into all the reasons I like Dragon Ball, but the main reason that may be peculiar to me is that I have a personal affinity for the main character. I always tell people if they want to know what it's like to know me in real life, just watch Dragon Ball and pay attention to Goku. Because he is a unique character, and if he were real, I would say person, because I don't know anyone else like him in fiction or in real life besides me, which is why I like the show so much. Well, not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons that it may not appeal to other people, and therefore why I might not recommend it. But you know how Ayn Rand has characters like Howard Rourke and John Galt, and they are more silent types. And then she has the more flamboyant hero Francisco. Well, she's stylizing there. She's isolating certain personality traits for the purpose of characterization, which is fine. I'm not saying that's a flaw at all, but it's not that you have to, one of these is better than the other, or even that you have to be one or the other in real life. These are isolations and exaggerations. It's not that, oh, if you were rational, you would be as silent as John Galt. But Goku is he is characterized as both severe and serious, and a childlike, fundamentally casual, silly goofball. And things just roll off of him. And it's not because he doesn't take things seriously, it's because he does take seriously the things that matter. And so he can have this lightness of being in the rest of his life because he has a proper perspective on his values. Now, most people see being serious as inherently grim, and as opposed to being this lighthearted and childlike. But I combine those two things, and I've never known anybody else that does in the same way. And Goku, as a fictional character, does. That is how he is portrayed. And I've never seen anybody else like that, and I love it. He's a soulmate, kind of. Except a male character. When I see women characters close to this, I do feel that soulmate attraction. Not soulmate in the mystical sense that there's one person for you, but like an alter ego Aristotelian kind of idea. So yeah, I just love that integration of two character traits that most people see as obviously contradictory, but which are presented in him as complementary. Anyway, all of that just to say, that's a major reason why I love the show so much, and that probably doesn't apply to many other people, so I don't necessarily think everybody should watch it. Although there are many great things about it, and if you are looking for recommendations from me, it's not a bad place to start, or it's not a bad thing to check out. Now, what other shows do I recommend? Well, probably Breaking Bad would be number one. There are a lot of great parts of Mad Men. I like what I've seen of The Walking Dead. But I don't actually like TV. We are supposed to be living in the golden age of television, but that is a joke, because the overriding attribute of TV is disintegration. These shows don't cohere. What you'll get is a season, and at best, the season is an integration. All of the episodes cohere. But then you get another season that wasn't planned, and you just get this pattern of stringing you along on a story that was never planned in advance, has no structure, and so you never get an ending because the seasons don't end the story, because this is supposed to be ongoing. We're going to do another season. But then the seasons aren't planned continuations. They weren't. Most of the time, the creators didn't have the events of later seasons in mind when they made earlier seasons. So what you end up with is just a giant mess. You get something like Mad Men, which is great in an elementary way. And I mean that the elements of Mad Men are great. Great episodes, great scenes, all adding up to nothing. I don't get a lot of value out of that. Fool me once, shame on. I'm going to do a George Bush thing here. Now, fool me once, shame on you. But I'm not going to continue to watch these shows when I know that this is the MO of the showrunners. Even something like Breaking Bad, that's probably the closest to an integrated show, although the ending of that contradicts the theme of the rest of the show. So that's really bad, but Breaking Bad is pretty good. I mean, it's impossible. It'd be like writing a perfect first draft. You can't do that. There's a reason editing is necessary. If you're going to write one draft, the best you can do is just do pretty good, but you're never going to have, the first draft is never going to have the coherence that an edited story will. A story you've gone over and made sure makes sense. So I don't like TV for that reason. Vince Gilligan, the showrunner of Breaking Bad, explicitly said, yeah, it would be boring if we knew what was going to happen in advance. Why just make it all up as I go along? Wow, brilliant. Okay, maybe that's fun for you in a superficial way of seeing whether you can write your characters out of places you've put them into, but that's not what you're supposed to be doing in art. You're just playing a game here. You're not creating real art. At least not overall. Again, episodes, seasons, they integrate, but overall as a show, again, at best, you get something that's mostly consistent like Breaking Bad, but then, of course, as I said, the ending contradicts the rest of the show. And then something like Mad Men, which is far worse than Breaking Bad. I don't know what the hell that show's supposed to be. It's just each season is its own thing, and it's... The most excited I ever was watching Mad Men was the first episode of season 2. Because there had been serious conflict and drama in the first season, and season 2 was coming back, and there was this tension of how is it going to be resolved, and it felt so important. I felt like you're supposed to feel when you're experiencing art. But then those major plot elements just fizzled out. They just went away. They still kept them there. They kept a technical consistency. Oh yeah, these events still happen. This big thing still happened. We're going to refer to it periodically. But it never had any narrative resolution. And that's unfortunately how TV shows operate today. The Walking Dead, I mean, it's based on a comic book that was premised on the idea that, it's usually the endings of these things that are bad. Endings of zombie stories are usually unsatisfying, so let's just not have any ending in mind. We're just going to keep this going like real life. So there's not going to be any ending. We're just going to continue doing the story. So that's the attitude of TV today. And so I don't care about TV. I much prefer movies. Because you make a movie all at once. It's much more common to get a contained whole experience in a movie. So I prefer those, and I don't watch a lot of TV. Now, I don't think there's anything inherent in the TV format that rules out their being integrated, but that's just not how TV is made today. So, as I say, I prefer movies. And if you want to know some movie recommendations, ask me another time. But as for TV, yeah, just the shows I've named, I guess. I love Dragon Ball. Breaking Bad is great. Mad Men, I liked. Again, there's a bunch of good parts that aren't put together well. And then I haven't seen a lot of The Walking Dead, but I liked what I saw. All of these shows are serious and dramatic and make you feel like important things are happening. Because they are, they just don't get resolved in satisfactory ways most of the time. Okay, last question. Are there any opinions Rand had that can be discarded due to the times she lived in? I noticed that you spoke about transsexualism in a much more benevolent way than Rand seemed to speak about homosexuals. No, there are no opinions Rand had that can be discarded due to the times she lived in. Even if it were true that in her times there was limited evidence regarding certain propositions, and so she came to wrong conclusions about drugs or homosexuality or whatever. You can't discard her views because of the times she lived in. You would have to give a reason. You would have to understand why she was wrong. And then you could say that why she was wrong was in part due to the times she lived in. But that's not the actual reason for why the view itself is wrong. That's why she didn't have the right evidence, you might say. But you can't just say, oh, Rand lived 50 years ago, so I don't have to take what she said seriously. No. Now, as for the other part of this, that I spoke about transsexualism, I say transgenderism, in a more benevolent way than Rand seemed to speak about homosexuals, well, that's just wrong. Because my view on homosexuals is the same as Rand's, and my view about trans people is, it parallels that view exactly. I think being gay or having a warped gender psychology are both inferior states of being, but not necessarily immoral. However, I think parading around one's homosexuality or flaunting it, being effeminate, is nihilistic. It's an attack on masculinity. And I think that going around and emphasizing that you are a contradiction to nature is the same kind of nihilism, except worse. So, I mean, am I benevolent about trans people? Well, I'm benevolent to people who have problems through no fault of their own, and I can see people with warped gender psychologies fitting that bill. I am not benevolent toward the nihilistic freaks who mutilate their genitals and justify that kind of action and encourage other people to do the same thing. I mean, I'm benevolent in the sense that I hate those people, and that is an act of benevolence, I guess, to hate evil. But I am as against the trans movement as a person could possibly be, because it is nihilism. And the only evidence you need for this is the fact that the remedy for being trans is always suggested to be reassignment surgery or mutilating your genitals. Now, when you have a conflict between consciousness and existence, between your psychology and your biology, the default should be, well, let me fix my mind. Let me fix my psychology, because existence, physical facts are the standard, and I should get my mind to conform to the facts, not the other way around. But that is not, we are told, the answer. The answer is to annihilate reality by destroying our physical form, mutilating it so that it fits in line with our delusions. This is obviously a primacy of consciousness view and a nihilistic version of it. It is a version that says, my mind determines reality. If I feel I'm a woman, that's all that matters. And if the objective physical world disagrees, I smash it and destroy it, even if it's my own body. So that's my view on that. If you'd like to keep up with everything I do, just go to charles2.com. If you'd like to enable me to do more, just go to patreon.com/charles2 and become a supporter. Thanks for listening.